Welcome. This is an introduction to the AMOS program, just to show you a bit how to draw path diagrams and other things that you'll need for the class. The most common way of getting into AMOS, at least here on the BYU campus, is to access it via SPSS. So in order to open AMOS, you're going to open a data set in SPSS, just have it open, and then you go to the Analyze menu. And go down at the bottom of it, you'll see it says AMOS, and I currently have AMOS 17 installed, though the computers on campus may differ slightly. So you just click on AMOS 17, and what that does is that will launch AMOS, and the data set that you were working with in SPSS will now be available in AMOS. This is the main interface for AMOS. Here, on the left, you have a bunch of tools for drawing the path diagrams, as well as identifying variables and telling AMOS to run the model, printing, undo, all sorts of things. So there are many things over here. I'll talk about a few of them, but if you hover over any item, it'll tell you what it does. Most of these things are also available up here in the menus. So you can see that the draw observed option is right here, or it's right here as a tool on the left. So you can find most things up here in these top menus if you prefer working that way. The first thing I like to do when I get started with a path diagram in AMOS is to go to the View menu and go to Interface Properties, and it'll open up this window here. And what I like to do is to change the orientation of the page to landscape. So I click on landscape and click apply, and we can close this up. And what that does, it just gives a little more room from left to right, which I tend to find is more useful than having up and down room while working in AMOS. So since in 503 we'll be using mostly factor models, or almost exclusively factor models, I'll show you quickly how you draw one of those factor models and then how you get the variables into the model. So you could do this one of two ways. One is to use the rectangle and oval tools over here, the rectangle for observed variables and the ovals for unobserved variables, to draw your latent variables and your observed variables. But AMOS has this nice feature, which is right here, which is the draw latent variable tool. Let me show you what it does. So I click on that. You can see that my icon's now turned into this, basically an icon that looks like the draw latent variable tool. So you just click and drag to make your latent variable as big as you would like. So I'll make it about that big. And let's say we have 5 indicators. So what you do is you hover your mouse over the oval you've just drawn, and you click 5 times, and it's going to draw 5 rectangles for the 5 observed variables, 5 circles for the 5 error variances, as well as the appropriate paths for relating observed variables to latent variables. It also nicely fills in some of the defaults, so we always set the or typically set the relationship between the error variance and the observed variable to 1, so those loadings. And it does the default of setting one of the factor loadings to 1, though I'll change that, and I'll show you how to do that here in a second. So that's how you easily draw a path model. If you wanted to draw a second one, you just draw it somewhere and do that, and then you're able to move it around. But we'll just deal with one for now. And so to get rid of this one, I'll use the Erase Objects tool, which is just this big old X. So we'll click on that, and you just click on the things that you don't want, and they go away. All right, so here is our model. If we want to move it around on the screen, we're going to use this little truck icon to use the Move Objects tool. The trick, though, is you need to select, if you want to move the whole diagram here, you need to select every part of that diagram, because if we just do one move object, all it's going to do is move the latent variable. So the way you do that is use these selection tools. The one-fingered one, which with the pointy finger there, just selects one object at a time, so we can go through and click one object at a time. The one with no fingers, or the fingers bent, deselects all the objects, so you can just click on that and it unselects them. And the one with all of them up will select every object, which is what we want here. So it'll just select everything. You can tell it's selected because everything's blue over here on the right. Now we grab our truck and we can just reposition the model anywhere in the screen. So we'll kind of center it here. Also, if you have multiple, if you want a precise replication of what you've drawn, you can use the copy or duplicate objects icon, have everything selected, and then it creates a photocopy. You move it over and move it to wherever you want. But again, we just want one thing, so I'm going to delete that. All right, I'll use the deselect all objects tool, and we'll get rid of everything. All right, so now what we need to do is label all of our latent variables. There's a couple ways to do this. The most manual way, or the way that gives you the most control, is to go to a latent variable and right-click on it, and you'll see a bunch of options. But the top one is Object Properties, and this will allow you to give names to each of the latent variables. So we can click on Object Properties, and we'll give this the variable name. We're working with Alliance data, so I'll just call this one Alliance. Okay, so that would be one way, and then you just go through, and you don't even have to close this. You just click on the next latent variable, and we can call this E1 for the first error variance, this next one E2, next one E3, and so on through all of them. Another way to do it is to use a plugin that AMOS provides. So if you go to the top menu bar, you can see that there's a plugins menu. And down the fourth plugin down here is called Name Unobserved Variables. So you can click on that. What it does is it provides a generic name for each of the latent variables. I like E1, E2, E3 for the error terms, but I usually like to have a name for the latent variable just to keep things straight. So I'll change that one from F1 to Alliance by, again, right-clicking on the latent variable and selecting Object Properties. Okay, now we need to put in the variables in the data set. So what we want to do is go over here onto the left side, and there is this stack of boxes here, which is the list variables in data set. So we click on that. You can see that all the variables in our data set that we had open in SPSS are now here and available in AMOS to use. So what we do is just simply grab the variable we want to deal with and drag it into the box that we want to use, like so. Okay. So this just tells us that item 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are now part of the model.